Hello, everyone, and welcome back to My Best Life, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have walked through adversity, challenged their assumptions, and discovered new ways of living with purpose, joy, and authenticity. Every conversation on this show is an invitation to look beyond the surface, to ask deeper questions about who we are, what truly matters, and how we can create lives that are not simply successful, but deeply fulfilling. Today's guest is Justin Shaw, and his journey is one that beautifully illustrates the surprising connection between laughter and healing. For years, Justin made people laugh as a stand-up comedian, entertaining audiences with sharp observations, quick wit, and the unique ability to find humor in the everyday. But behind the laughter was a much deeper journey, one of personal transformation, spiritual awakening, and the search for lasting peace. Like so many people, Justin discovered that while laughter can lift us in a moment, true healing asks us to look inward. Rather than running from life's challenges, he began asking what they were trying to teach him. That journey eventually led him to write Sobriety 101. That's Sourcery, a book that explores consciousness, emotional healing, and reconnecting with what he calls Source. Drawing from his own experiences, Justin offers a perspective that encourages us to see life's struggles not as punishments or setbacks, but as opportunities to awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves. It's a reminder that healing isn't about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who we've always been beneath the fear, the pain, and the stories we tell ourselves. Over the next hour, we'll explore Justin's remarkable path from comedian to spiritual teacher, the insights behind Sobriety 101, the role of consciousness in personal transformation, and why laughter may be one of the most underrated tools for healing that we possess. Charlie Chaplin, whose own life was marked by tremendous hardship, once said, "A day without laughter is a day wasted." Justin, what does that quote mean to you today, and how has laughter shaped your own journey of healing and awakening?
Yeah, I feel there's so much healing in laughter, and I certainly don't go a day without laughter. And I identify a lot with Charlie because he went through a ton of stuff, and the way he dealt with it was through funny. And there's so much healing in laughter, and I call myself a mystical comedian because in order to kind of get people in the right energy to heal, laughter is is like a sidestep, a shortcut to right to that energy of healing. And then I've found that people are opening up and willing to listen more and accept, kind of the ideas when they're in that energy. It's kind of like, it's a bit like the opposite would be, if you're in, a medical room and a doctor walks in and says, "I'm sorry, you have cancer." Well, now you're in the energy of fear. So you're only open to hear things that match that energy. So when you ask the doctor then, "How long do I have?" "Well, I have 6 months to live." And you're willing to accept that because you're in the energy of fear and you're willing to accept anything that matches that. You will only, kind of surrender to the energy you're currently in. So, the people that say no, those are those are the sorcerers right there. But getting people in that higher vibration of laughter and then bringing them in, that's the key.
All right, well, we're going to talk a lot more about laughter today, and we'll get into your career as a stand-up comedian. But before we get into that and the book that you eventually wrote, tell me about your life before being a comedian. Who was Justin Shaw as a young man?
Yeah, I've always had that comedic bug. And it was because I kind of grew up in, what I consider to be an emotional vacuum. And, growing up, my dad was around a little bit when I was younger, but, things were happening in that marriage. It was just toxic and not good. And, dad was doing his thing and mom was just kind of, she's a very stubborn person. She was very sweet, but very stubborn. And she was a high introvert. So she would spend a lot of time in her room. as especially as I got older. And I know now she was just in a lot of pain from what she went through as a child and as an adult through the divorce. And it was just her and I. The brothers and sisters are much older. They were moved out, so it was literally her and I. And so, and with her kind of checking out sometimes, she just kind of had these episodes where she just she just go in a room and so I would just I'd do my thing. So, and in that time in the 90s, pop culture is not quite what it is today. So what we had was, the VHSs and the CDs, and kind of a little bit later came the DVDs. But when you found something you liked, you'd watch it over and over and over again, because you don't have the kind of content that you have today, where there's just a lit. It's just there's so much stuff to watch on Netflix, Hulu, and just all that, and it's just constantly coming out. And we did not have that. So when you found something you like, you just watch it over and over and over again. And that was me. I would tape episodes of Saturday Night Live. It would bring me out of my pain. My mother didn't understand the concept of love. She really didn't. She didn't say the word very often. She didn't hug a lot. She just was not that type of person. And since she was the only person, and humans need that. I mean, that biologically speaking, the babies back in the 1920s here in America, they used to, the adoption agencies, they used to take in babies, and they were dying, and they couldn't figure out why. They were feeding them, they were making sure they got enough water and food and changing them. And biologically speaking, a living entity should survive this. Well, they started picking them up and they started living. Humans are very, very different. We need love. We need connection, or we die. So, I didn't die, but kind of in the inside, I was. But so that's what brought me out, was comedy. And I would watch Saturday Night Live and tape that. And, The Simpsons were on the top of their game. Jim Carrey had all his movies coming out, Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber. And, Adam Sandler was doing his thing. And, it's just all these just hilarious things. And I'd find it, and then I'd watch it over and over again. I realized that I could mimic a lot of the voices and a lot of the things. And I'd go to my mother, and I could make her laugh. 'Cause she was not in a laughing mood most of the time, and I realized I could make her laugh. I'd kind of do the president at the time. We were kind of switching over from George Bush Senior into Bill Clinton. And I could kind of do, both of them a little bit. And I'd be like, Mom, not gonna do it. And, wouldn't be prudent at this juncture, but I wasn't really doing George Bush. I was doing Dana Carvey doing George Bush. It was just this over the top kind of like, and she would laugh. And so I liked that. So I kept that going. And so that was really my childhood. Was, I was addicted to laughing. Brought me out of my pain, and food was probably the other one I turned to. Drugs and alcohol came much later, but food was a big one, and laughter. So I look forward to coming home every day and watching my shows and laughing with my cherry Coke and all the sugar and all the snacks. And I was a chunky kid. So, but those were the things. Those were the things that really brought me out of it. So comedy's been a big part of my life forever. It really has been.
Well, I came of age around that same time. We're probably of a similar age, because, all of the references that you just referred to, that, they all resonate with me deeply. Yeah. So, just coming back to what you were saying there about, living with your mom, her not displaying a lot of emotion, and you finding, meaning in comedy. What did your younger self believe would lead to a meaningful life?
I never even thought about it. I was so locked in on moment to moment living. It was just, I really didn't have a lot of thinking of my future at that time. And, that's not a big deal. When you're a kid, that's not too big a deal. But my mom never really talked to me about it. I really loved sports, I wanted to play in the NBA. I can tell you that, but that wasn't going to happen. But, she didn't say no. She's like, you might want to have a backup plan. But that was really what I wanted to do, I guess, at that time. It was later that I realized that I actually had a good niche, and that comedy was something I actually could do, and was good at, and actually had a chance at. I couldn't even make the high school basketball team. I played football, but I couldn't play. I didn't make the high school basketball team. So it was like the NBA was out that quickly. So yeah, there wasn't really a lot of planning, and a lot of my life has been like that. Just like, the old joke of, do I look like a guy with a plan? Like it just, and here we are. So, but I've got vision now, and I understand how that works, and pulling in a future and creating your future, kind of connecting to the energy of that future is what pulls it in. So I have more planning now, but I really didn't back then.
So, when did you decide that comedy was going to be your career path? Was there like a key moment or turning point in your life when everything became clear?
It was in yeah, senior year of high school. I seemed to really have a knack for it, and people to make people laugh, and to be personable, and kind of do the voices and things, and I just really loved doing it. And I like the attention that came from it. That was the other thing that was very addicting for me, is kind of that attention. It can be very addicting, but it was something that was like, okay, I decided to go to college, so I wasn't moving right. So after college, that was the plan, and so that's what happened. But that's really when I decided, was kind of senior year of high school, was like, okay, I'm going to go to college, because I've always wanted to, for whatever reason, I just felt like I wanted to go to college and get a degree. It was just something I wanted to do, you know. And so I did, and it was, so after college is that's when I kind of really started trying to pursue it. It's just drugs and alcohol really kind of ruin things. So, but
Right.
that's when I decided, was in high school.
Okay. So, when was the first time that you actually got up on a stage in front of people, and how did that go?
That was in college, and it was at there was a comedy class I took at the local community college, ASU, Arizona State. They didn't have anything quite. They had classes that were like movie class, but nothing that was like a stand up kind of like comedy class, like writing and preparing stuff. So I went to the local community college, and took a course there that, wouldn't count towards my degree, but I just had to take it. And so that was the first time ever, and I can remember being extremely nervous, of course, and but it went well, and I remember feeling extremely high afterwards. It was like, oh, I got them to laugh, and that was really fun, and it wasn't, it's horrible. It didn't go horrible. I got some laughs, and when you get laughs and you're on stage, there's just this jolt of like, whoa, like I want more of that. What is that?
Right. Right.
Like, and so that was the first time. And so after that, it was kind of chasing that, but again, it was mixed, and also like, I like that high, but I also like the high of drugs and alcohol, and so in that, those two things really weren't mixing well, as I found out when I moved to California, which is that's I was trying to pursue my that was after college, and so that's when I tried to really pursue the dream, and things kind of went awry, I suppose.
So, as you're pursuing this career in stand up, and, getting better from performance to performance, I imagine, what is performing on stage teaching you about yourself?
Yeah, that I really loved the attention, that I really liked, and I loved making people laugh. There was an energy in these rooms that I would go, and I never made it. I never got paid. So my stand up career was just a lot of open mics, and I kind of stopped it. I was doing a lot of drugs and alcohol in California. I was trying out for various things. I made the you know couple cool things happened, and it's the Groundlings Theater, which is the big theater in L.A. That's Will Ferrell and Phil Hartman, a lot of SNL guys have went through. So it was nice. It was cool to get accepted there. It really doesn't mean a ton. You have to kind of go through and get classes before you actually hit the stage. You have to pass 4 levels of classes, but I was accepted into it. And that was exciting. I was doing kind of open mics, and kind of getting invited back, but still not ever getting paid. But I was enjoying it so much, I really didn't care. So I really learned that this was I loved making people laugh. I loved the energy around. It was just like my mom. I could feel when she was in in a vibration, just a negative vibration, and I was able to change that. And so that kind of was like a almost like a power trip. It's like I can change people's vibrations. I have the power to do that, and I'm very sensitive to people's energy, so I could feel like kind of the change. And so that was also something that was really kind of fun. Was I was able, changing people's vibrations. I just learned that I loved making people feel good. Then
Mm,
there was like an energy exchange between the two of us. I was trying making them feel good. They made me feel good, which made me feel better. And then I'd go further, and then like there was this high like energy exchange. So
right.
it's a lot of fun.
So you mentioned, drugs and alcohol on a few occasions, and I wanted to ask, does comedy ever become a way of hiding pain as much as expressing joy?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think you look back and you look some of the greatest comedians, they're some of the most damaged. I mean, you can look back and see there's a lot of tragedy and a lot of really funny people's lives, and that's how they deal with it is to just and they and they just throw themselves into their comedy. And that's what it takes to make great comedy. You have to completely commit to it. And if your life isn't going so well and you've got all this, you've got this pain or you've got things going on, that's what you want to do. You don't want to do anything else but completely throw yourself into something else that brings you out of that pain. So, I was looking, Robin Williams is just the most classic example. I think he was, one of the funniest person to ever live. And he was just but you could tell, even on his stage that there was a darkness and there was a sadness to him. And you could just tell and feel it, and you can see it in a lot of his stand up now. You can go back and look, and you can see the pain in his eyes a lot of times, even on stage. But you could see also that this was an incredible release, and it was bringing him out of that pain. But you could tell that pain was there and it existed. And you can tell that by someone's eye. The eyes are the window of the soul. And I can always, I read people very well now through the eyes. So yeah, it really is much more than bringing people joy. That was kind of the second place, was bringing myself out of that pain. And it is similar to a drug, because it's creating, those same kind of chemicals, the dopamine and stuff in the brain. And it brought me out of my pain. So, and I'd want to throw myself into it and do the best I could. So that's really why I did it. It wasn't, necessarily because, I would have loved to, become, have my own show and like all this, the money and the fame. But what I would concentrate on is how good it made me feel, to make others feel, to laugh. And again, it's that energy exchange. So yeah, I'd say I did it for selfish reasons. I did it to make myself feel good, and it does make me feel good. So yeah, I'd say it's more than just bringing. It is bringing myself out of the pain. That's really the number one reason why I did it.
Mm.
Yeah, and why I did it for free so long. I just kept doing it.
So the last comedy show that I attended was a couple of years ago, and I didn't know it when I was going there, but apparently my friend got us a table that was like right in the front row, right by the stage, which was the biggest mistake, because that's where you inevitably get called on by the
Hmm.
comedian. Now, I was wise enough not to try to heckle this guy, because he did start talking to us and asking us some questions, but I was like, I'm not getting I'm not getting into it with a professional comedian. It's not going to end well. So I just kind of shut my mouth. But I'm sure in your career you've probably had the experience of being heckled, and
Hmm.
I'm wondering, what is that like, and what have audiences taught you over the years?
Yeah, well, they tell you what's good and what's not, and you have to just try stuff out. You just gotta. It's like throwing it on the wall and seeing what sticks. It's just, and you have to like, and you just have to be prepared that not everything is going to work. Even it's, I'd find this is like I find this really funny, and then you hit the stage and the crowd didn't find it funny, or there'd be something that was just like, I don't know if this is going to work, and then but they respond, and then they love it. And so you just don't know until you get up there and you just throw it out and just see. So you just come up with a set, and usually it's pretty short for these open mics. It's 3 to 5 minutes, and so I can come up with all kinds of stuff in 3 and 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? Like that's so easy. So, it wasn't these long sets, that's, these comedians and, like Eddie Murphy Raw, the hour and it wasn't, so I could really come up with quite a bit and it would go so fast. But yeah, the heckling and, I just kind of respond with, with kind of laughing and just kind of say, oh, come on. Oh, okay, that didn't land. That didn't land. All right, we're good. Okay, next joke. Like I just kind of whatever I just kind of go in and just be like, okay, I'm going to tell some jokes now, and then just go and just see what happens, and so and you just have to not let it get to you, and a lot of times, and especially in Los Angeles, I would be like Xanax was really my favorite drug, like and that's kind of a legal kind of borderline alcohol and Xanax because they would just completely take away any sort of fear, it's gone. So I would be up there on stage just fearless, not feeling anything. So, I just would, and that's how I did it for so long. And that's how I allowed myself to do it because I had no fear on, Xanax is essentially just alcohol in a pill. So I'm, getting drunk and you just don't care. So, and I just get up there and well, I wouldn't care. And I'd heckle them right back and they'd love it. They'd love it. So, that's how I handled it. And so and it worked, for a time until I needed to, till everything got too out of control.
So, as your life has evolved, how has your relationship with humor changed, if at all?
It hasn't. Yeah, no, I'm my biggest fan, I think. I make myself laugh all the time. And there's times when, like I wish there was someone that could hear my jokes, like when I'm around my apartment. I live alone with my dog and I wish there was someone, but it'd have to be someone who's like seen everything that I've seen, because I'll see something and kind of be able to work it back to like some kind of pop culture reference or something and just crack myself up. So I'll be just laughing in my apartment just to myself and it's just so much fun. But I did come miss, making other people laugh because it was something I kind of, I hung up the mic, quite a bit ago when I really wanted to get sober and I realized I was just having these panic attacks and like really struggling with getting on stage. So, but overall, nothing has changed. I absolutely adore, making myself laugh and that's all that really matters in the end. So
So, you mentioned, that moment where you realized you wanted to get sober. Was there a defining moment when you realized that your life needed to change? What did that look like?
yeah, it was living in Los Angeles when everything I left ASU. I had a graduated with a degree in a severe drug problem. So I moved to Los Angeles already with issues and they just continued to escalate and move up there, which of course. So, the point was really, especially something like Xanax, it just deletes your memory. So I realized I went out for a set one time and I woke up the next day and I didn't remember anything. I don't remember anything. I don't know how I did. I don't know. I didn't remember if I showed. And like my memory stopped, and I don't remember going to the club. I had to call and say like, "Did I show up? Did I do something?" It was like, "Yeah, you did, but you were really sloppy and you were kind of a mess, and like, we're not gonna have you back." So that was really like okay, things are getting out of control. I can't seem to control the amount anymore and I'm losing days of memory and I can't I don't know how I'm doing. So that was the point. It was like, okay, all right, this is becoming an issue and that's really when I decided to try to go to rehab and make myself better. And, even though that I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do comedy without drugs. If I wasn't able to, but I couldn't. It was getting to the point where I couldn't do comedy with drugs either. So, it was just time to. It was just time. It just was like, okay, I need to go. I need to do this, and that was kind of the stopping point was just losing days of memory and these chunks of time that I just would just complete blackout. And it was scary because it was like I don't know how I got to this club. I don't know when I went up. I don't know what I said. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember anything. So that was terrifying. And that's really was the first kind of like, all right, I need help.
So, what did healing actually look like for you in the beginning?
Yeah, the beginning, good question. Yeah, the beginning was very different. The beginning, I never had much of a spiritual life. So the beginning was just, and I was doing more than just Xanax and alcohol. There's a lot of stimulants involved and cocaine and, after pot was obviously in there and, there was Adderall at times and, there's all kinds of stuff. And so, I was just like, okay, so I'm going to check into rehab and I need to just get myself clean. My body needs to be cleaned of these things. I'm struggling so much because the opiates. Oh, the opiate. I forgot about the opiate. The opiates were in there too. And so I would mix things. And that's really when things would get out of hand. And that was yeah. Oh man, a lot. But I just assumed that I kept doing drugs because my body was physically addicted to these drugs. I was getting sick. The opiates would, they'd drown me out or if the benzos would leave, the Xanax would leave and I have super high anxiety and I'd have to have more or the opiates would leave and I'd start getting sick. I mean, I was really bad, 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 bad. So yeah, that's really when that was really the first time, and I just figured just my body's gonna get clean, and then once my body's clean, I just won't do it again. I won't want to do it again because I'll remember how bad it was doing it. And that approach lasted shockingly 3 months. I look back now and I'm impressed with myself that it even lasted 3 months of just of nothing else, of no spiritual aspect or anything. Like I was just determined to do it, but 3 months still isn't very long. So I was and there I was back in rehab a second time. But that's what the first time looked like was just get my body clean. I'm fine. This spiritual, AA and spiritual. You can keep all that. I don't want anything to do anything with that. I'm good. Just clean me out. And so that's what I did, and it didn't work. So yeah, so it had to change. Yeah.
Okay, so how did your understanding of yourself begin to shift during that journey? Because you said at first, there was absolutely no spiritual component to it, but eventually it seems like you did go down that path. So, how are things shifting for you at that time?
Yeah, I started to realize that I was being pretty arrogant and, so I kind of went back to rehab. I moved back to Arizona at this time because it wasn't working. I wasn't able to, I knew too many people in California that had drugs and it was too easy to get them. And I was back on drugs at that point. So it was time to kind of, I was like 26 and it was time to call mom and just say, I give up. I can't do this. I'm miserable. I can't, this is not working. Even if a career, if I'm this miserable, even if I had a bunch of money in a career and the drugs were making me so miserable, it wouldn't have mattered. So I just let me come home. So I went back, came back here and went to rehab. And, I went to, I picked a place that was, kind of what I can spiritual, what I now consider to be religious. And now I know there's a big difference. And, but that it was kind of a Christian based place and faith based and everything. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to embrace this stuff because apparently I need to, because I guess I don't know everything there is to know. So I just embraced that and I went back and I had, I felt good, like in these kind of Bible study groups, and there was something to it about the camaraderie and, reading and so I gravitated towards that. And the whole AA thing, AA and Christianity really, go well together because AA is essentially, disguised Christianity. It's kind of built on the foundation of Christianity. And so those two went really well together for quite a while. And I was here sober. I had kind of, I did a couple stand-up things, Tempe and stuff. But it just, I was just getting really panicky at that time. And I just, it just wasn't, it just lost its fun. So because I was really struggling, kind of getting myself together. So going so early in sobriety wasn't a good idea. But I did that, and after about 7 years, and I'd quit comedy, everything. I was clean for quite a long time, and this kind of transitions into the next spiritual awakening and development. So I'll just go ahead and get into that. So my mother gets sick at this time, terminally ill, and my mother was had her issues, but I loved her very much. She was a sweet person. She was always kind to everybody. She just was really not kind to herself. That's really the only person she was not kind to. She had her moments where she wouldn't talk and stuff, and she had her issues, but she did the best job she could. And that's what was important. She did the best job that she could. She gave everything she had. And so when she was dying, I had this Christian programming in my head that, she never went to church. My church said that everyone's a sinner and we're all hellbound and you have to give yourself to Jesus, otherwise you're going to hell. And so that idea really crept into my soul. I really was kind of a weak-minded individual back then. I didn't question things. I just kind of accepted. It was like, oh, okay, like I have to, I kind of went to a pastor, and I told him, don't worry about it. I think my mom is kind of one of these heathens you talk about. And of course, he wouldn't say, yes, she's going to hell, but she wouldn't say she's going to heaven either. So, like I felt like I take it upon myself. I needed to like convert her or whatever. And so I was worried in the last days, and I was filled with fear, and it just was really kind of traumatizing. And it was hard enough to see her pass, but this whole other level of this hell issue, it just the church is supposed to be there when through hard times they're supposed to help you through it. Well, not only did they not help, but they made it worse. So I then, after she passed, I relapsed, went right back to using drugs and alcohol, because church wasn't helping, AA wasn't helping, nothing was helping, and drugs did. We went back. It's like, okay, yeah, we're back on this. We're doing this for now. Let's drink and let's just try to keep it to a minimum. Let's not get too crazy with it. That can only last for so long. So, you know, I I went back, and I decided at that time that I was going to replace my with my pastor with a shaman. I was going to try a different approach, because I just didn't. Something was wrong. Something was wrong with this idea that my mother would be in hell. I just couldn't grasp that, even though I was scared. And so I decided to go different routes and hear from different people and hear from different, you know, religions and beliefs and this whole spiritual thing. And, tell me about yoga, so my dad, who's much more in the kind of consciousness, kind of spirituality kind of person, and, over just religion. So he had a friend who was a shaman, and he came in for 2 weeks every day, and he worked with me, and he started breaking down some of my false beliefs, some of my limiting beliefs from childhood, from adulthood, from just these beliefs that were not working for me, that were not doing me any good. So, I started, breaking those down and really questioning. I was like, you sound right. And, I started meditating, and I started these visualization techniques, and I started, yoga. I was very inflexible, and, yoga covers all three: mind, body, and spirit. It's just absolutely wonderful. And so I was really threw myself into that, and the meditation, and, it's still an absolute everyday must. I wake up in the morning, I yoga, I meditate, no questions asked. It has to happen every day. So I was doing all these things, and one day, man, it's the craziest thing. I was stretching. I wasn't even meditating at the time, but I was stretching, and something came over me. And it was like, I call it my bliss attack. And a lot of people, they call it the near death experience, where they experience this religious experience that's like they come out of their body and they leave. I didn't come out of my body. I definitely was in my body, but emotionally, it was like I was dying, and feeling what it was like to dying in the best way, because I was a healthy guy. I was not dying at all, but I was filled with love. So I call this my near life experience, or my bliss attack. And it was just this amazing waves of love. This was 3 hours, and it was just came over me. I was no drugs. That was important to know. I was working on myself. I was probably a month sober at that time. I did no drugs in my body whatsoever. I had coffee that morning, but so it was just incredible. And at the same time, I'm feeling this feeling. I'm getting these downloads from the universe. I'm getting talked to, not in an audible way, but it's like hitting my spirit, hitting my mind, not audibly. It's like, but something is giving me like these downloads and giving me, and I know they're true because of how I'm feeling that moment and having no reason to feel in that moment. Something is happening. And I realize this is what they call a religious experience. And I realized what stood in the way of my religious experience for so long was religion. It's very
Mm.
paradoxical, right? Like, all this was happening, and I realized in that moment, there's this field. There is a field of energy that surrounds us at all times. It's like we're fish swimming in water. Do fish really understand that they're swimming in water? Probably not. You go ask a fish, do you really water around you? They'd probably say, what are you talking about? I don't. What do you mean? And that's what this is. This was like realizing that we're in this like this fishbowl of consciousness, and there's this field, almost like you can tap into it, like it's like turning off airplane mode. Like I felt like my whole life I was in airplane mode, and this was the moment it got turned off, and all the texts and all the emails started coming in, man. It was like crazy. And so it was just incredible. And it's and going back to the fish, it was a fish in a pond, living in a pond my whole life, they're just swimming around in this little pond, and all of a sudden it was like I got caught by a fisherman and got pulled out of that pond to see that there's a lot of ponds, there's an ocean, there's land, like what is this, and then got thrown back in. And so now I'm that fish that just saw the world. And how do you explain that to other fish? There's this whole other world out there. Like, once you see the water, you want to tell everyone else. And that is source energy. So the whole book, the whole is sorcery, SOUCRY. So it's tapping into this universal field. And once you able to understand how to do it, like you can download things, because everything, I don't think there's any original thought that I've had or anyone else has had. They're just able to tap in. It's already here. The past, present, future, it's all happening now. And if you can tap into it, that's what musicians do. It's like, where do these amazing songs come from? How did the Beatles do what they did? It was there. They just kind of got into their groove, and it just kind of came, and that's how this worked. And that's where the book came from. And that's was the whole point, is this whole system of trying to help people have their own bliss attack. And that's what I created, was this blueprint, or this map, to help other people have their own bliss attack, and to help people out of their trauma. And it just absolutely was incredible. So it was just, I love talking about it because it always gives me like goosebumps and stuff. It's just my favorite thing to talk about. But yeah, so that happened.
Well, it sounds like an incredible experience, and I've had a similar experience that was brought on by plant medicine, and I know that other people, it can be, as you said, near death experience. It can be any number of different things that can bring about this powerful, as you called it, bliss attack or near life experience, which is a wonderful way of putting it. And I'm wondering, why do you think it happened when it happened in your life?
It's that old saying of like, once the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And this energy is that teacher that's like, okay, now you're open. So the whole idea with meditation is you're going from a converted focus to, what is the name of it? Converted focus, and I forget the name of the word. I'll think of it. But it's so we're in a convergent focus right now. So where your focus is converged on, divergent. That's the other word. So your focus is converged on something, and we're constantly in a convergent focus all throughout the day. We need to be. So you go from the waking up the kids, getting them to school. Then we're going to work, and we're concentrating on work, and then we come home, we're on the phone. Put the kids away. Watch TV, and we're going in bed. Well, you've now told the creator of the universe you are too busy for it, and and which is fine. The creator of the universe is going to leave you alone, because this is a world of absolute free will. So, understanding that, I had to create that, divergent focus. And I like to compare it to, if if you're standing up against a brick wall with your nose against the brick wall, you're going to see a blurry shade of red. Right? That's all you're going to see. Well, if you take a step back, okay, you make out a brick, take another step back, right? There's multiple bricks. Take another step back, you realize, okay, this is a wall. You're taking a few more step backs, and now you realize what was just a blurry shade of red is actually just like this magnificent castle. And now you've reached a divergent focus, the broadening of the focus. And so that's what I decided. That's what I figured out was kind of the key to all this was allowing this energy to speak and guide me. And it's I do it every day, and I get all kinds of information, and it just makes me feel good. And it's really kind of the key for everything. And it's just been absolutely wonderful.
So let's talk a bit about your book, Sorcery 101. So, what inspired you first to write that book, and why did you intentionally spell sorcery the way that you did?
Yes, my favorite stuff to talk about. Yeah. So the book came to me. I was living in Sedona after a multiple traumas that had happened to me. I lost my mother. I lost my sister. I lost a close childhood friend. My son was taken from me. My ex moved, went to Boston to visit her family and never came back and cut me out of their lives. I still haven't seen him to this day. It's been 3.5 years. So, I had all these multiple traumas happen, and I had to, and it's somewhere in the middle there is when this bliss attack happened the first time. But I needed to go to Sedona and start healing. That's what I felt called to. So I just moved up there, and it's very powerful up there. There's a lot of energies, and the natives would go up there, and I knew the natives would go up there, and they wouldn't live up there necessarily. They'd go up there to heal and then kind of come back. And so I was just thinking, all right, I'll probably, I don't think I'm going to live up there forever, but I need to go and at least, live there for a year or whatever. And so I did. And I did a lot of plant medicines there, but my bliss attacks don't come on psychedelics. They don't come on anything. I have to be completely drug free. No, no pills, no, and nothing. There can't be anything, and even psychedelics. Like, I've had great experiences on psychedelics, believe me, but this is in next level. This is something past that. This is something better than that. And so the only time that my bliss attacks have ever come is when I'm completely sober. So I am, I'm up there and I'm kind of meditating, putting out to the universe that, it's like, things are really not going so great in my life right now. And I really need guidance. I need something. So, about a month later, when I put that out, and I was on Bell Rock, a very famous vortex, and doing this meditation and putting it out and envisioning things. And I was on a hike, and boom, the bliss attack happens. I'm just alone on a hike, just listening to music, but I feel it. I know when it's happening, and it just overtakes me, and it's just unbelievable. And all of a sudden, it starts just shooting all this stuff at me. It was like, you're going to create a system to help people heal from trauma. You're going to do it with no religious undertones like AA. This is going to be built on spirituality, not religion. You're going to create a little bit, but you're going to use it. You're going to use something like the 12 steps, but you're going to create something a little bit different. So instead of 12 steps, I've got 13 rungs. So and that's kind of where the similarities end, even though that's really not that similar. But I thought of the 12 steps, and I thought of something, that's kind of like a map and a blueprint to help people heal. But my system of the 13 rungs is not just addiction or anything like that. It's focused on spiritual bankruptcy. And spiritual bankruptcy comes with, many symptoms: anxiety, depression. Anything labeled chronic really is I believe at its core is a spiritual bankruptcy. I mean, it could be autism, just any of these chronic condition, cancer, autoimmune disorders, even physical, disorders. I believe this is at the core, and this is my feeling. This is what I'm being kind of given this information. So I get super excited, and I go home and I start, outlining everything immediately. Like, there was just immediately, I was so excited. So I just, the 13 rungs, and they just all started just coming. Like, I just was writing, I was like, oh my God. And it's just this I didn't have to think. I was hooked into this, like the Wi-Fi, you don't know Wi-Fi is there, and you have to have a computer. Well, your mind is that computer. It's just getting on the right frequency. And so it was all there, and it just like came off. And, and then I was thinking about, like, what to call it. And, I was listening listening to Wayne Dyer one day, and he was talking about, he kind of mentioned just real briefly in one of his speeches, and he was mentioning someone of great spiritual ilk, like meeting someone, that, I don't know if it was the Dalai Lama, I don't forget exactly who it was, but meeting this person who is very high on the spiritual ladder, and he called him, he's like this, the guy, the energy was coming from him, he was just absolutely amazing. And he was like a sorcerer, but not like, not like a wizard or anything. He was just getting all his energy from source, and boom, it hit me right there. Spell it with a U. And then he just goes on talking about other things. And so that was the moment, was like, okay, so we're going to call this sorcery. We're going to spell it with a U to separate it from wizards and magic. And I know we'd all like to turn our roommate into a frog sometimes, or levitate the phone to our hand. But I'm not Merlin or Gandalf, so it was important to separate it a little bit. And so a lot of people don't catch the U. It's like, oh, sorcery. It's I get that a lot. It's just I'm not really a sorcerer. It's ridiculous. It's like, well, no, no, no. This is different. This is real magic. This is like emotional alchemy. This is that kind of sorcery. So yeah, that's really where it all came from, and it just has excited me ever since. And hearing people's feedback. But yeah, that was it. That was the genesis right there.
So, so the full title of your book is Sorcery 101: 13 Rungs to a Higher Elevation of Consciousness. Can you tell us more about those 13 rungs? What do they look like?
Oh, sure. I mean, so it's there not enough time to go over all 13, certainly, but yeah, there's the first one starts with shadow work, which it's the first one for a reason. It's extremely important to understand that the two sides of us, and especially with me, we have this side of us that's the shadow, that's created through our traumas and these limiting beliefs. That's not us. In AA they'd say, I'm an alcoholic. Well, no, no, you're not. You're the awareness of the alcoholic. You're not. That's not you. You're not the character your past has created. So, that it's very important to understand this concept. And just to kind of briefly go over it, I realized at times I came up with this kind of metaphor for it. It's if you're in a car, and the shadow can either be driving your car, can be in the passenger seat, or it can be in the back seat. And it's important to know which is which. So if the shadow is driving your car, it's always going to drive it off a cliff. Maybe you recover the car, put it back on the road. Well, it's going to drive off a cliff again. It's going to constantly be aiming for the cliff. And so this is people you see, street people. This was me. I lived on the street for week or two here and there, never for long periods of time, but it was just because I just wanted to get high, and I didn't want to go home or do anything else. So that's what I did. And so the shadow was driving my car. It's just constantly driving it off the cliff. I mean, it's people that street people, these are people that just can't function in society at all. And so their shadow is driving the car. And it's important to know that when you look at someone and their eyes are black, it's not a good sign. Generally, I've found people that have, when the shadow is driving the car, a lot of times their eyes will be black. And I've seen this on certain celebrities that I've seen. There's a certain pop diva that that her eyes are black, and it's turned. And so if you watch out for that, kind of the signs, and to kind of keep your distance from these people. They're good people, they're fine, but their shadow is driving the car. So if you move it to the passenger seat, well, this is what happened with me with Christianity, and why I struggled so much getting back on stage, because I had these limiting beliefs still in my system from childhood, that I'm not good enough, I'm not really that funny. The shadow really started talking to me because I didn't have the drugs to drown it out. So the shadows in my passenger seat kind of talking to me, and especially with Christianity, there's a lot of fear in Christianity, that the whole hell thing is held over a lot of people's heads. And so you've got this fear, like, you got to be a good Christian, otherwise you're going to hell. And so it's creating this fear, and not letting you be who you are, authenticity. And so where it's important is in back. That's where it is now. And you can't kick it out of the car, and so you have to love it. Because if you start hating your shadow, and you hate the side of you, you're now creating the same emotions the shadow is comprised of. You're not doing any good. So you have to love the side of you. Understand that it was created in a time of need, and you're just moving past it. You don't need it anymore. So you're just moving into the back seat. and you're checking it. It's like a child in the backseat. It's like you get the child in the in the little high chair or whatever, the car seat, and you're just how's the air back there, buddy? You need some Cheerios. You want some sliced apples. Like you're just checking on it, and you're just kind of it's there, and you're loving it. And so it's just an important concept to understand. So that's why that's the first one. I can go over a couple of them just briefly. The second one is also very important. I call it a call for inaction. There's a kind of a reversal there. The call to action is the call to inaction. This is meditation, and this is what I was talking about, the convergent divergent focus, and how important it is to meditate and call in this energy and say, invite it in. Say, I'm not busy. Talk to me. So it is just a critical part of understanding. The third one is surrender to serenity, which essentially is understanding the human condition and surrendering to the fact that jerky people are in a lot of pain, and if you attack the situation with love, peace will follow. But one of the biggest things that's helped me is understanding people, and I'm so I can switch someone off of being a jerk so quickly now, like because I'm just they want the negative energy back, because these are people that feed on it, and they're so used to that energy, that anger energy. It's a very charging, it's not a fun energy, but it's also very charging, and it keeps people going. So they're constantly looking for things in their world to try to make them angry, because this is the energy they're throwing. It's the gas. That's the gas they're putting in their car. So I lived with a woman who was an absolute anger junkie, and she would just find things to just make her mad. And she could walk in one day and past a huge pile of dishes and say nothing, and be in the great mood, and then the next day walk in to maybe half that pile of dishes and explode over it. And so I started realizing that this is someone who's just addicted to this emotion, that they're just charging themselves up, and they're just finding anything they can. It could be traffic, it could be, but understanding why they're doing this, and not to feed into it, and to make things better. But understanding people and how they work, and the subconscious, and all that stuff, that's all the surrender to serenity.
Hmm.
There's health is wealth, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's mind, body, spirit. When you feed one, you're feeding the other two. Take care of your body. Emotion alchemy. That's the fifth one. That's the real magic, where it's at. That is alchemizing negative emotions into positive ones through acts of kindness, or you can alchemize fear, and kind of you can, if you have the energy of fear and you get curious about it, you can kind of alchemize it into something completely different. So fear can be turned into curiosity, which then can be which can be a very useful thing. Fear is not very useful. You can't live in faith and fear at the same time. You got to pick one. Can't do both. Doesn't work that way. So there's many things I go over in that chapter that kind of these various emotions that can be alchemized into higher elevated emotions. And these acts, certainly kindness is the biggest one, where you can really change the way you feel, and you are in control of how you feel at all times. That's what I realized. So I don't have time to go over all 13, but there's a few more, and but that's essentially how I set up the book. So it's just these 13 things that if you pay attention, it will absolutely change your life and break you out of being the robot, right? If you're not constantly questioning your thoughts and your feelings before they become actions, you have been regulated to a biological robot. You're a meat computer. And so we have a lot of these people. The big most favorite term now is the NPC, the non-player character, and these are people that just aren't questioning anything, and they're just running the program, and they're just running that program, and the world is full of them. So and that's another, kind of go over that, and that's surrender to serenity. But it's getting out, pulling yourself out of the character, and seeing what you are, and that's where the real change happens. So I created this whole thing of this sorcerer's creed, and all these this kind of 13 things that just help me every day to kind of read and go over. And then there's the rungs themselves, and it's just, I wrote the book for me, to be honest. Like, it's helped me, there is no healed, I don't feel, when you've been through really hard trauma, but there's no healed, but there is a constant desire for healing, and that's where you want to be. There, you can't ever expect to be healed, and it's because, if you take a shotgun to the arm, you can leave it a gaping wound, and or if you let it heal without surgery or anything like that, it's going to be sensitive to the touch. For you're going to be like holding it back, and this is the same for emotional, right? So you're going to be holding it back. You're going to be you're not going to want to like put it near anybody. If someone gets near it, you're going to react. You're not going to respond. You're going to react because it hurts. And so this is the same with emotional trauma. You get near that emotional trauma, you react. And there's, a sorcerer responds. They don't react.
Right.
And so, that's that whole thing. It's just all things like that are kind of loaded into there. And there's just a lot of stuff that I was, kind of given that was like, okay, here's where this is gonna, and just the book was just so much fun to write. But I really did write it for me, but I realized that it really could help other people. And I keep it light. It's very, very funny too. It's written in a very funny manner.
Well, speaking of helping other people, how can someone begin healing even if they don't know where to start?
Well, the best way to start is kind of understanding these concepts of, this shadow character and meditation. That's really where to start. You don't need to do anything else. If you start understanding those things and getting curious about other people, that's going to help a ton. Get curious about other people, get curious about the world, start questioning things. Don't just take what people say and just, okay, well, does that make sense? Start asking yourself, because there's an intuitive voice and there's an instinctual voice. The instinct and intuition, people use them in the same, but they're not the same at all. That's actually the eighth rung, I think, is instinct versus intuition. And so understanding these concepts and knowing that they're different, and learning, that there's things you can do. But meditation and yoga is just, that's what I recommend to everyone. There's guided meditations, there's the Calm app, the Headspace, Insight Timer, all guided meditations. I had to start with guided meditations because my mind, it's just like getting your body in shape. You got to get your mind in shape. I mean, my mind was, it was like my web browser back in college was 19 tabs open, 3 were frozen, and I don't know where that music is coming from. Like that was my mind back then. But I've learned, I've trained it, and now I still have meditations where I'm not focused. Always, you're always going to have that, but most meditations I get locked in, and it is just absolutely incredible. But understand, when you start meditating, it's tough. People say I'm bad at meditation. There's no good and bad at meditation. There's practiced and there's unpracticed, and that's all there is. So if you continue with it, you will see results. And so if you don't know where to start with meditation. And I promise, just that alone, without going deep into these other concepts and everything else, that alone will start changing things. Absolutely, 100%.
I couldn't agree more. I have my own daily meditation practice, and I can confirm that it is absolutely life changing.
It is.
Justin, there's so many more questions I would love to ask you. You've raised so many really really interesting points during this conversation. I think I'm going to have you back at some point in the future, because I feel like we've barely scratched the surface here.
We have like barely.
Yeah, yeah. But unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time together today, and I do have just one last question for you. The theme of this podcast is how we live our best lives. So I wanted to ask you, Justin, what does it mean to you to live your best life?
Yeah, great question. You know, for me, authenticity is key. Is the number one key. Be your authentic self. I love going to Comic Cons. We have them in Phoenix. We can't call it Comic Con anymore because San Diego took that name. We call it Fan Fusion, but it's a Phoenix Comic Con. And I go there and I see these people living their authentic lives. They're just nerded out. They are dressed in their video game gear or pop or whatever that is, Pokemon and the whole suit, and everyone. The energy at these places is just incredible because everyone they're not at work. They're being their authentic self. If you want to see authenticity, go to a Comic-Con in one of these big cities. They're in every city, every once a year, and it's living that authentic life. And if you're not living an authentic life, you're essentially holding your soul hostage. And if there's someone in your life that is standing in that way, and they don't understand that, they're not someone that should really be in your life. I believe it was Dr. Seuss. Oh, great quote in the book. It's Dr. Seuss. It's you know, it, those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. So it's living that authentic life, and that is living your best life, because it will set your soul free. And you just got to go for it. Be the Comic-Con people and just live your authentic life, and just do it without any care of what anyone else thinks, because that will set you free. And that's living your best life.
Well said. Justin, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. It was great. Good times.